Oh, I just realized the blurb is by Florence Welch.
Oh, Florence and the Machine!
If it's good enough for the machine, it's good enough for me.
Happy New Year, readers! It's 2018, and
Woohoo.
that means it's time for some resolutions and some brand new habits.
We are thinking about all of the books that we want to read in the new year and really expanding our horizons into books that we wouldn't normally pick up. So for this installment, these are our 6 picks for New Year, New Reading Habits.
My first pick is Unplug, A Simple Guide to Meditation by Susie Yalof-Schwartz. And this book is all about why it's so important to meditate. Now, I don't normally pick up books like this because I thought they were a little woo-woo. And I wasn't great at meditation because I'm not great at sitting still and not thinking about my to-do list or what I'm gonna make for dinner. But Susie really lays out the data and the science behind meditation and why it's so important that you can actually retrain your brain. So I have to say I tore through this. It wasn't too woo-woo for me, and now, Susie, I'm trying to meditate. I'm trying.
My first book is Bone by Yrsa Daley-Ward. It's a debut collection of poetry. I don't read a ton of poetry, even though when I stumble across poems or people recommend them to me, I usually enjoy it, but I'm just much more likely to pick up something like a novel that has a very straightforward narrative. What drew me to Bone is that it's got a really conversational style, so I found it, at least for me, someone who doesn't read a ton of poetry, very accessible and very compelling.
My second pick is also poetry. I read Nikki Giovanni's A Good Cry, and I'm also not really driven to pick up poetry necessarily, but I'm a huge fan of Nikki Giovanni. She is a teacher, she's an activist, she's a poet, and the way she plays with language is so creative. This volume has poems on topics that are as varied as her own life experience, and then she goes into 3 or 4 page vignettes on topics like space, our frontier, and today's education system. So it's absolutely fascinating and a really fun, slim read.
Maybe we're poetry people now.
Turns out.
My second pick is The Liars Club by Mary Karr. I actually borrowed this from Abby. This is her copy. I don't read very many memoirs at all, but I feel like you read quite a few.
I'm a memoir addict.
And you're really good about telling me which ones are the unmissable ones. And I listened to a Terry Gross interview with the author on the radio, and Mary Karr is so interesting and so funny and compelling. And this book is about her very tumultuous upbringing in Texas, and it is just as funny and just as compelling. I laughed out loud and cried in public while reading this book, so that is the kind of experience you can expect.
Yep. My third pick is American Wolf by Nate Blakeslee. This is a nonfiction saga about the introduction of wolves back into Yellowstone National Park. And this book centers on 06, a badass mama wolf who can totally bring down an elk by herself. And it really looks at, after the wolves were reintroduced, how it affected the ecosystem, how it affected the hunting community. It really had ripples far wider than just the wolves themselves. So this would not be a book that I would have necessarily gravitated towards and picked up on my own, but I have to say I loved it. The story of these wolves is told in such a riveting way that you feel like you're there in the snow in Yellowstone watching these packs. It's fascinating.
Something that I loved about this is we were chatting about it while you were reading this book, and at the beginning you said to me like, oh, I'm not sure, you know, it's a little tough going, it's so dense, and then maybe 50 pages later you were texting me like, it's incredible. Do you know what wolves can do? They're amazing.
Totally.
And I feel like that is the experience we were looking for when we were trying to read books that are outside our comfort zone.
Exactly. And now this is the book that I talk about at every cocktail party. So thanks, Nate Blakeslee.
My final pick is Kindred by Octavia Butler. This book is a mix of sci-fi and horror and historical fiction, and frankly, don't ever go anywhere with me or ask me anything about sci-fi unless you want to hear me go on my rant about how Mary Shelley invented sci-fi and that actually it's a woman's game and female sci-fi is everything. But somehow I had never read anything by Octavia Butler, so when we decided to do reading resolutions for this year, I thought, okay, how can I fill in the gaps in my knowledge in some of my favorite genres where there are just these blank spaces where there are books that I think if you knew me, you would assume that I had read them, and I just haven't. And I'm so glad that I started with Kindred. It's incredible. Everyone should read it right away. Also, come talk to me about Mary Shelley and the birth of sci-fi.
At your next party. There you have it, readers. Those are our reading resolutions for 2018. We want to know what books you're reading that are out of your wheelhouse, so let us know in comments below.
Or tweet at us at Read It Forward. And if you want even more great recommendations from us, you can sign up for our weekly newsletter at readitforward.com.